Welcome back to the Piping Pastor. Well, I'd like to start this video today with a big thank you to Piper Dave. I got the sheet, that beginner investment sheet that he was speaking about in one of his previous videos, and he was kind enough to send that to me. So something that I can share with my kids about investing and so forth. I think it's one of the great benefits we have in this community that there is such a wide range of expertise because we all have different lines, right? Different occupations, different hobbies, so on and so forth. So beyond all the knowledge of pipes and tobacco, which of course there is aplenty, there's also these other areas that we can all share with each other. And I think it's wonderful to share those, even though he would, of course, say he is not a financial expert. He's not a certified financial planner and things of that nature. But it's one of those things where you may not be an expert in the field itself, but you're still able to rather successfully invest. So um, it's like one of those things where someone may not be a certified trainer, right? But they lost a bunch of weight, they got into shape, and now they compete in triathlons. They're not a certified trainer, they didn't go to school for that, but they have that level of knowledge, obviously, that's demonstrated in their life. So it may not be a bad idea to listen to that person, right? So again, thank you, Dave. I am smoking again today my Faber pipe, not favorite, Faber. Seems like just recently I was complaining about this pipe and the reason I don't smoke it very often. Here I am with it again. In it, I'm smoking some Fusilier's Ration, which I've always enjoyed. I've always thought it was a good tobacco. I was turned on to this initially by Mutt Chop 10 years ago, 8 years ago, whatever it was, because he had mentioned it was in his rotation. And so I gave it a go, and I really liked it. But I recently got another 10 recently, and I was like, man, this is better than I remember. But I'm wondering if perhaps I'm not thinking it's better than I remember because now it's going to be a discontinued blend. I was tempted to stock up on it the way I did the bourbon barrel aged plum pudding, which came in today, happily. But I'm like, do I really want to cellar deep on this? Because I mean, if it is going to be discontinued, right? I could cellar deep on it and have it and be fine, right? But I want to make sure I'm really enjoying it for itself and not just that psychological push to get something because it may be scarce. Um, it's all out of stock in anywhere, any case. So I already had a wee look on a couple of different places, and they're out of stock. So we'll see. I mean, as they produce more over the next month or so before they shut down, if it comes available again, and I still have this impression of it, then yeah, I might buy a few more tins because it is a lovely tobacco. Um, Same could not be said, however, for the coffee I have right now. Not bad, but it's a new brand. Not a new brand, a new brand to me that my wife had recently found at the store. I think it's Atlantic Pacific Tea Company or something. I don't know. But it was on sale, and it's usually a rather expensive coffee, so she thought we would give it a go. And it says espresso roast, and espresso grind is usually what we go for because we like that finer grind because it creates a much more rich, deep, thick, cup of coffee when you brew it in a French press. But espresso roast just means it's a darker roast, which just means the beans are roasted for longer. But it's a coarser grind. So, and in the French press, the coarser the grind, the weaker the brew. So it's okay, but not really loving it. So, but of all the things one can complain about, certainly a more coarse grind on coffee is not anywhere near the top level of concern. Speaking of which, of course, our California brethren, you all have been in my prayers, and I know that that's even if you're not directly in the path of the fire or had any kind of destruction personally or personal loss or so on and so forth. I know that just the air quality that you have to deal with, even if you're far away from those fires, is pretty bad. I remember when we lived in Maryland, the Canadian wildfires would create this haze and fog and make it almost to where you didn't want to go outside, or if you went outside and had any kind of breathing difficulty or asthma or anything, it made it nearly impossible to breathe. So there are a lot of environmental concerns for those outside the direct area. So you all are in my prayers as well. Now, on to the sermon for today. So we left off last time when we had just started getting into Noah. We're talking about the line of Enoch and so on and so forth, and Enoch's descendants. And it gets into Noah, talking about how Noah was also an exceptional person. And this is kind of where it gets into why Noah was exceptional and the effects of this exceptional person's actions in the world. So, by faith, Noah, being warned of God of things not seen yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by which he condemned the world and became heir of righteousness, which is by faith. So Moses is exceptional because he felt the moving of God, he heard the moving of God, and in fear of God acted, and in doing so saved his house. The rest of the earth was condemned. That was not Noah's fault, right? The rest of the earth was condemned in and of their own actions, because remember we were talking about how the moral degradation of society and so forth, kind of leading up to this, the deluge. But through Noah's actions, he saved his house, right? And his actions were listening to God and obeying God in fear of God. Not fear like, oh, I'm afraid. Fear in this word in Hebrew, it means awe, which, yeah, being afraid is a little bit of it, right? I mean, you can be in awe of a cataclysm, right? But in fear and awe of God, above anything else, above what his neighbors thought, above his expectations and in the world and so on and so forth. His chief concern was God, and as a result of that, he was credited with righteousness. So, in Noah's building of the ark at the command of God, there are three main points to be considered. It implies, first of all, that he had an earnest conviction of the sanctity and greatness of moral truth, a conviction which, more than any other, is the basis of religious character. He was surrounded by a populace which had broken altogether away from the laws of God. Impiety, impurity, and licentiousness were the order of the day. Every imagination of the thoughts of man's heart was only evil continually. The corruption was universal and profound. To the numbers of men, the surrounding atmosphere of evil would be simply destructive to moral sight. Those of us who know nothing of our own hearts and characters must know this. Easily we get accustomed to the sight of what is wrong, and how soon we feel complacency, or something like complacency, towards it. How it undermines our sense of our own sense of malignity, and makes us, if not exactly its captives, yet its tolerant apologist. So what he's saying here in this first point, and we probably won't do all 3 points today because we're already almost 9 minutes. But what he's saying here in this first point is that not only did Moses react to, in awe of God, right? God's commanding this and he's acting, but he's also acting in reaction to the moral decline around him. He notices it, he's aware of it, and he's acting against it. And then he goes on to say, oftentimes, even those of us who are not fully in tune with moral righteousness, we know when something is wrong, right? You may not be a completely upstanding, righteous person, right? But even then, still, you know when something is wrong. And he says, in most cases, we either join in with it or we ignore it. And I like this part where he says, how soon we feel complacency or something like complacency towards it, and how it undermines our own sense and makes us, if not exactly as captive, yet as tolerant apologist. We become complacent with it. there's a moral decline, there's evil, there's ethical violations all over the place, and we get so inundated with it that we're just like, you know what, whatever. It's everywhere. The way it is, advertising is horrible, right? There's billboards, TV commercials with people in lewd positions and nearly fully exposed, and all these other different things, and TV, and it's everywhere. You can't stop it, right? So just whatever. You become complacent with it. And he says, even when you become complacent, even though you may not be captive, even though you may not have fallen into that moral degradation yourself, you become its tolerant apologist. You become an apostle for it. You become someone who, through your complacency, you're like, it's okay. I'm not saying anything against it. I'm not taking any kind of a moral, ethical stand. I'm not sharing my own views in a positive way, right? You don't have to jump in someone's face and scream at them if they're going to hell because they've done something that you view as morally repugnant, right? But you also can't just go through life with blinders, put your head down, and say, whatever, not my concern. We unfortunately have that tendency, and we're not going to get to the other two. We'll get to it next time. We unfortunately have that tendency oftentimes in the Christian community because we put ourselves in our little Christian bubbles. And we go to church. Our kids go to a Christian school. They do after school activities with the church and with the other kids that go to that church. And all of our friends go to the same church, and we have home group together. And it's like we never venture out into the world. That's kind of what he's talking about there. We're becoming apologists for that behavior because we're not taking any kind of a stand against it. And again, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, be a jerk about it, right? You can take a moral stand without being a jerk. It's like Jesus modeled for us in the Bible, right? Give to Caesar's what is Caesar's, right? He did, whip the money changers when they were in the temple, right? So there is a line you don't cross, and you have to take more specific action. But at the end of the day, we can stand up for our morals. We can stand up for our ethics against that what society tells us is okay. And if we don't, then our complacency makes us apologists for it. And I think it's a wonderful thing to hear about in this sermon from 130 years ago. Again, it kind of demonstrates that the pattern of sin within humanity is nothing new. The stuff we're dealing with today, they were dealing with 100 years ago, 200 years ago, a couple thousand years ago. It existed just in different forms. So there was an opportunity then to stand up. There's an opportunity now to stand up. So, in any case, well, that is it for me. I'm going to get back to my Fusiliers ration here and my further evaluation of whether or not to sell her. So I hope you all have a lovely week. And as always, happy reading.